The Saudi market has now achieved a major inflection point. And so, we would expect that over the next 5 to 10 years, we should see further growth similar to other markets that we've seen in other regions in Asia, in Africa, and in the LATAM region.
This is a country from where within 25 milliseconds of connectivity, you can connect to 1/3 of the world.
There's some reasons why KSA has a right to play in this area, and one of those reasons is that it's strategically positioned between three continents: Europe, Africa, and Asia, and that will help us in terms of not only looking after the captive workloads within the country, but also potentially serving neighboring countries and further beyond.
You're watching W.Media Deep Dive, our exclusive video podcast series where we take a closer look at the cloud and data center industry and the connectivity ecosystem across South Asia and the Middle East. I'm your host, Deborah Gray, Editor-in-Chief at W.Media, and today we will take a deep dive into Saudi Arabia, specifically what makes Saudi Arabia an attractive data center market. Joining us today for this power-packed discussion are our special guests, Rajit Nanda, Chief Executive Officer, DataVolt, Mabs Khan, Chief Strategy Officer, Center3, and Obinna Isiadinso, Global Sector Lead, Data Centers and Cloud Services, International Finance Corporation. Welcome to W.Media Deep Dive. How are we doing today?
Very well. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for your invite.
Thank you, Deborah.
All right, gentlemen, let's start with you telling us a little bit about your own professional journey and also a little bit about your organization.
Well, I'll kick us off. Again, thank you, Deborah, for inviting me to this session. And so I'm a global sector lead for investments in the data center sector for the IFC. The IFC, we are the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. We focus, we're a major investor and lender to fast-growing companies in emerging markets, as well as infrastructure projects in emerging markets globally. Our data center business is a part of our digital infrastructure business, which is actually a part of our global infrastructure business within IFC. So I've been with the IFC now for 10 years, investing in emerging markets. And prior to joining the IFC, I spent about 10, 12 years in private equity in Africa, investing in telecom and other companies across the Africa private equity market.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rajit Nanda. I'm the CEO of DataVolt. DataVolt is a young company, a year and a half in this space of data center, but making very rapid strides over these last 18 months. We have a presence right now in the Kingdom of Saudi and Uzbekistan in Central Asia, CIS region. We are, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes. We are doing a number of data centers in the kingdom, construction for all of which will kick off during the course of this calendar year. 2 of them are in the city of Riyadh, primarily for cloud infrastructure and AI workload. But the one that is obviously the talk of the town is the very large data center that's going to kick off at the city of NEOM. The first phase is a $5 billion investment, and one of the unique data centers which is being built on a net zero configuration, and will 100% cater for AI workload. In fact, it's that particular site is evolving for us as the world's largest AI factory. So a lot of exciting stuff happening around for us, and we'll talk about it in the coming minutes with Deborah and with Mabs and Obinna. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajit. Thank you, Deborah, for the kind invite. Looking forward to the panel today. I'm Mabs Khan. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of Center3. Up to very recently, actually, I was the Chief Commercial Officer, so I'll give you some insights from both roles. So Center3 is a digital infrastructure organization. It's wholly owned by STC, but we pride ourselves on being a carrier-neutral organization. We provide data centers, 24 within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and one just being built in Bahrain. That's the start of our international expansion. 16 subsea cables, and the ability to provide international and national connectivity. And finally, we provide IX services, which is important to localizing content in the region and in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Perfect. With that, let's take a deep dive into our very first segment. That is an overview of the Saudi Arabia data center market. Now, gentlemen, you're all experts. You've been studying this market, watching it for years. How have you seen the digital infrastructure industry grow and evolve in in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, so I think the transformation has been very profound. A short few years ago, digital infrastructure really comprised of enterprise on-premise in the majority of, and some telco-led hosting and co-location. Now that's moved on considerably in the last 3 to 4 years, and now we have a globally aligned industry, which is really booming. If you look at the figures from the analysts, we're talking something like 30% CAGR, going all the way, forecasted all the way through to 2030. That could go even higher with AI. There's some reasons why KSA has a right to play in this area, and one of those reasons is that it's strategically positioned between 3 continents, Europe, Africa, and Asia. And that will help us in terms of not only looking after the captive workloads within the country, but also potentially serving neighboring countries and further beyond. So we're very proud of Center 3 to be supporting KSA's vision to be the regional hub and potentially the AI hub for the future.
Obinna, how have you what have you observed in the Saudi Arabian digital infrastructure industry?
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. And I'll build off of Bab's comments. We've seen really an evolution of this market, and the fact that the market today is about 100 megawatt markets, 100 megawatts today, and really has evolved from being sort of more telco driven to now essentially more hyperscale driven. And we've been at the IFC, we've been investing in data centers now since 2010. We started actually investing in frontier markets and retail enterprise data center projects in places like Russia, Ukraine, India, China, and South Africa. And in 2020, we actually expanded our investment strategy to be both a lender and an investor in wholesale and hyperscale data center projects globally. And so now we're investors in Scala data centers in Brazil. We're investors in Kio Networks in Mexico. We're lenders and investors to Liquid Telecom and Wyoc in Africa. We're also lenders to Raxio data centers in Africa, as well as Yonder in Malaysia. And one of the things that we've learned across all of these projects is that markets are they grow at different paces over time. And so many of those markets that we started off investing in, they started off small, and after 5 to 10 years, they have grown significantly. So, for example, South Africa 5 years ago was a 50 megawatt market. Today, South Africa is a 250 megawatt market. And one of the things that we've learned is really hyperscale expansion into a market is a key inflection point. Hyperscalers, they're responsible for 80 to 90% of all new data center development globally. And so one of the things that we've learned is that once a hyperscaler enters into a market, that market is going to take off. Over the next 5 to 10 years, you should see significant growth. And so where we are today with the Saudi market, given the fact that you have the US hyperscalers, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Oracle, are there now in that market. The Saudi market has now achieved a major inflection point. And so we would expect that over the next 5 to 10 years, we should see further growth similar to other markets that we've seen in other regions in Asia, in Africa, and in the LATAM region.
Obinna obviously brings a great international perspective and ties it to how IFC sees it potentially in the context of Saudi. So as an operator which has its origins in the kingdom, just to put a few stats out there to put the context and then explain a little bit on how we see the trajectory of growth in this market. So the total market in Saudi is primarily a triangulated story between Riyadh, Jeddah, and Dammam. Okay, so these are the three nerve centers around which the whole data center industry is currently organized. And there is a expectation that these are the clusters that will grow outside of the new cluster that we are promoting and we are developing, which is the NEOM cluster. And I'll talk about it because that's a very impressive and fascinating story. Riyadh is 273 megawatts IT load. You have Jeddah, which is 125 megawatts IT load right now, and Dammam, which is 123. So if you sum it up all together, it's about 525 megawatts of IT load right now. A market which is not super small, but not enough in the context of the existing population, how digital savvy that country's population is, and most importantly, the government-driven digital transformation under the Vision 2030 that is taking place inside the kingdom in general. What is important to note is that we have, in the last year or so, noticeably seen the advent of the hyperscalers into the Riyadh market. We have AWS, Microsoft, and Oracle all expanding their presence by either self-provisioning or leasing space in Tier 3 and Tier 4 carrier-neutral data centers. From our side, DataVolt, we are breaking ground and starting construction for two data centers in Riyadh, one in the third quarter of 2025 and the second one in the fourth quarter of this year, all within these availability zones. And interestingly, data centers that are designed from an architecture perspective, not only to cater to the cloud infrastructure, but also to the AI inferencing requirements. In fact, our data centers in Riyadh are going to be the first ones that will kick off the AI inferencing requirement in the context of what we see, the evolving workloads within the macro context of the data center space. As far as Jeddah is concerned, look, the size of the market opportunity in Jeddah is right now smaller, but growing steadily. The big challenge is that right now, if you map the market in Jeddah, the demand base is lower compared to Riyadh. We understand that aspect and we are looking at that market. But what we find as the most interesting aspect of Jeddah in terms of the future development of that cluster is that the city's strategic location near the Red Sea makes it a key subsea cable landing point, improving on the regional connectivity. For us, the kingdom's whole data center evolution is not about the domestic cloud infra requirement or the domestic inferencing requirement going forward. For us, it is about bringing the world to the kingdom as far as the whole digital economy, digital connectivity is to be looked at. We look at the kingdom as the most I would say, advantaged political location in the planet today. This is a country from where within 25 milliseconds of connectivity, you can connect to 1/3 of the world. The entire 1.4 billion population of Africa across the Red Sea, okay, and you connect also to Europe out there. So if you look at these three markets, just between Africa, between the Middle East, and between the part of Europe, which is within the 20-25 milliseconds from a latency perspective, at least for inference AI workload, you are addressing 1/3 of the world's population. And that is such a strategic and such a competitive advantage. And the country has, under Vision 2030, over the last 5 years, very strategically working on so many of these subsea landing stations. In fact, Mabs, who's representing Center 3, he can talk about it because Center 3 is involved in a number of these landing stations. So all of this actually, if you put into context, augur very well in terms of taking the kingdom to the next level of creating that whole data center ecosystem, which is catering not only for the domestic requirements, but making it a central repository for the purpose of catering to 1/3 of the world's population from the kingdom.
This idea of becoming a regional hub. One of the things that we've seen in the data center sector globally is that the hyperscalers they are prioritizing the regional hub markets in each region from an AI CapEx perspective. So in South America, you have Brazil, that's sort of the hub in that region. In Asia, you have India and Malaysia. They have become regional hubs. And it's very interesting in Asia because Singapore was essentially the initial regional hub in that region. And now Malaysia, over the past year or so, has now become a second regional hub. It's growing from 250 megawatts today to potentially 1.3 gigawatts over the next 3 to 5 years. So what's interesting about the Saudi market, as Rajit was saying, is that market essentially is also now positioning itself as a regional hub. And so that's also something that I think is very interesting and attractive about this market.
Okay, I'd really like to go to Mabs now. Mabs, you have also seen this industry at close quarters. What is your assessment of Riyadh, Jeddah, and Dammam? How have you seen them grow, and what kind of a potential do you see for future?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Deborah. So just building on what the gentleman have been saying, obviously the market's booming, as I mentioned, by the fact that the hyperscalers have entered. We're very proud to announce that we have got active contracts with the major hyperscalers already. We're already hosting them in the region across the 3 different metro regions, but also with cloud operators as well, and gaming and content, which is also important to the ecosystem. Considering, let's start by saying that the Saudi Arabia has a large population of 35 million plus. It's a relatively young population and data hungry. So localizing content is particularly important to serve those people, but also support what Obinna said about being the regional data hub. Now, talking about the specific regions, let's go into that to answer your question specifically. So Riyadh is obviously the capital of the Kingdom Saudi Arabia, and is really the control center. It hosts a market which is rich with government customers, with private sector customers, and also finance customers. And that's not just exclusive to those customers. And for those reasons, as Rajit said, the hyperscalers have come. And they probably just haven't had one availability zone. We've hosted at least 2 of the hyperscalers with 3 triangulated availability zones in the same region. If you move on to Jeddah, as Rajit said, a different makeup, but equally as important to the overall ecosystem because it is the global telecoms hub. It's where the majority of the subsea cables land. Jeddah is on the western region and not far from the coast, and therefore has access to those landing stations. And it's also important because it supports one of the biggest internet exchanges, which is Center 3's internet exchange, which allows the hosting of content into the kingdom. It also hosts the majority of the telcos. Obviously, the telcos want to be near to the subsea cables to be able to connect to their infrastructures. And then the final thing to say about Dammam. Dammam is becoming extremely important. It was already important in terms of it was the industrial and energy hub for the country. That means a lot of manufacturing, oil and gas, logistics types of companies. But what we're seeing in Dammam is that the hyperscalers will come with their AI deployments. And even Saudi AI, which is the buzz of the town at the moment, will be deploying initially in Dammam. So quickly, Dammam is becoming the AI center although it's in the eastern region, the AI center for the kingdom. At a later point, I think there will be AI deployments in Riyadh in larger scope. It's worth saying one final thing. I mentioned the geographical position and strategic location of KSA. There are a number of bordering countries on KSA, but also the fact that it connects 3 different continents through the subsea cables, and it's pretty central. Why is that important? Because when we start talking about AI and cloud workloads, we shouldn't be only looking to support the workloads within the country. We should also be looking to support the neighboring countries and therefore becoming the regional hub and becoming the next AI hub. I hope that answers your question, Deborah.
Perfect. And since you brought up AI, I'd like to get Obinna in on this. AI workloads, they're bringing in new demands, high density, low latency, extreme interconnectivity. So, Obinna, how do you plan to address these? If you're planning to enter this market, what's your roadmap to address AI workloads?
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. And let me just take a step back to just give you a sense of how we think about different workloads. There's been a lot of talk and focus on AI over the past year or two, but when you look at the evolution of the data center business, really, the data center market starts off as a retail enterprise market, right? And so that's really where the majority of your workloads, that's where it started, and that's been the driver. And that's really, catering to, local businesses, local enterprises, potentially government, potentially local multinationals that have some sort of a presence in a specific market. And that's usually how most data center markets begin and evolve and grow. And over time, what tends to happen is there becomes interest and demand to migrate to the cloud. And so the global hyperscalers look to enter into a market. And so the Microsofts, the Googles, the Amazons, some of the Chinese hyperscalers, they look to obtain some sort of an edge sort of presence in a market. And as they see demand growing for their cloud platforms, they look to increase their capacity and their exposure in that market. And so they start off with some sort of small exposure, some sort of edge deployment, and that will grow into a wholesale, a build to suit type of capacity. And over time, that could grow into some sort of a hyperscale type of presence. And from a scale perspective, that could grow from maybe less than 1 megawatt. That could grow to 1 to 10 megawatts for wholesale build to suit capacity, and then sort of cloud capacity would be in the sort of 10 to potentially 50 megawatt range. And that tends to be the evolution that we've seen in terms of growth of data center markets, starting from enterprise and then growing into sort of cloud and hyperscale. But now over the past 2 years, what we've now seen is an additional growth driver, which is these AI workloads. And really, when we think about the AI workloads, there's really sort of two main types. One really is sort of training workloads, and then the second is the inference workloads. And in the training, obviously, that's where these different models are being trained, for example, like ChatGPT and Claude and other models. And the models have to be trained for 6 to 12 to 18 months on data. And the data centers that are being built for those training types of use cases, those tend to be at least 100 megawatts, and they potentially they're scaling up to 1,000 megawatts, a gigawatt. So we're seeing that for example, in markets like in the US, we're starting to see that in Asia, and now obviously in the Saudi market, we're seeing these types of AI data centers that are being built for these workloads. Now, the other workload that we're also seeing is the inference workloads, which would be, these are workloads where the data that has now been trained is obviously being used by users, whether it's commercial or enterprises. And these types of data centers, they will not necessarily be as large, so they don't necessarily need to be 100, 500 gigawatt in size. They could be smaller. They could be 10 to 50 megawatts. They can also be closer to the users, closer to enterprises, closer to urban locations. And so you're going to see a mix of these different types of data centers being built. Saudi clearly is going to be one of those markets where you will see these large AI types of data centers being built because it has a number of attractive aspects, whether it's land and energy and location, as Rajit had mentioned. And so there will be opportunities to support the development of those types of AI types of data centers in that market. And there will also be an opportunity to support retail enterprise data centers in some of the tier 2 and tier 3 markets, as Babs has mentioned. So that's how we're looking at these opportunities when it comes to what are the different types of workloads and the data centers that will be needed to support that work.
Thank you so much, Obinna. Now I really want to talk about NEOM. Rajit, take it away. Tell us, why is it so exciting as one of the biggest emerging markets in the region?
So thank you, Deborah, for that. Of course, the NEOM Oxagon project that we are doing is one of the most exciting things that is happening in the overall landscape of data centers across the globe, not just in the kingdom, not just in the region, but across the globe. It's eventually a campus that is being built out for 1.5 gigawatts IT load, primarily actually solely catering for AI workload out there. But the first phase, which is more relevant and which we see being ready for service in the first quarter of 2028, approximately 2.5 years from now, is going to be the world's largest net zero data center. Of course, just as Obinna was mentioning just a few minutes back, it is capitalizing on the distinct advantages that the kingdom has in the context of build out of this core digital infrastructure, which is the data center, by having not only the land, but what I call the strong political will in managing the whole permitting
That's a good
process.
point, that's a good point, but I'd like to delve into that into our next segment. So you can probably talk more about it there. And that is our second segment, regulatory environment and role of government. We've seen Vision 2030, the cloud first policy, interest in NEOM. So Rajat, tell us, how has all of this created the perfect storm, which is now allowing Saudi Arabia's market to bloom and grow?
Okay, look, the first and the most important thing is to understand today is the world is facing the biggest opportunity in front of itself. Let's just contextualize and put this in perspective. The world's largest opportunity in the last 100 years, bigger than any point of inflection that we have seen, whether Industrial Revolution 1, 2, 3, internet boom, and so on and so forth, all of that put together, the biggest point of inflection that the world is going through in this decade is the advent and the use cases of artificial intelligence. Okay, and we are just at what I call the incipient stage of artificial intelligence. We have not even gone to AGI. We haven't even gone to artificial super intelligence, which is another 10-year journey from now. At this stage, we are only talking about Gen AI, which I call as the first ground level potential of artificial intelligence. But what is it in the context of this opportunity and in the context of this revolution that can be the biggest impediment? The biggest impediment to this is not having the infrastructure in place for the AI stack to actually reach that level of maturity where everything that is being spoken about in terms of the opportunity is realized. So think about it in the following manner. You can build the most fanciest space-age cars of the world, okay, full of gadgets and gizmos out there, okay? But if you don't have the road on which these cars have to ply, then these cars will never leave the factory. So the whole AI stack, the applications, the engineering, everything else that is required for these applications to change humanity will not be realized at all unless we have these data centers, which are the fundamental building blocks on which the whole AI stack has to evolve eventually. So as I was making that comparison, think of these data centers as the roads on which this space age or these new cars have to ply. First, we need to build the roads before we think of building the most fanciest cars out there. And the whole opportunity in front of us is
to make sure that these data centers are able to be ready to absorb the huge AI potential that exists in the market. And what is the biggest constraint today? There are a number of constraints, but what is the biggest constraint to enabling and unleashing the ability of these data centers to be ready? It is energy. Okay. And the kingdom today is blessed because of the vision that it has been working on over the last 5-7 years in particular to make itself the renewable and the lowest cost energy capital of the world.
We will
Today,
discuss that. We will discuss renewable energy in our next segment. I'd like to move to Mabs now for a second. Mabs, what would you say are some of the operational challenges that data centers are facing today in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. I mean, I think Rajit started to move on to those points, and I think they're quite prevalent. So of course, let me just answer two questions: AI as well as operational challenges. They kind of go together. So
Okay.
the things that we're doing in the AI space are not only in the data center, but they're in the connectivity space because they go together. Otherwise, you end up having castles in the sand. And Rajit mentioned we need to have the digital infrastructure in place to support that boom going forwards. Now, what are we doing? We're trying to build data centers, probably 50 megawatts plus now, whereas before they were kind of 2 to 10 megawatts in size, going up to 20 when we expanded them. We're making them modular, and the reason why we're making them modular is that some of the use cases on AI are still to bed down. They're still to mature. So we've got to watch the market and make sure that there's a good balance between cloud and traditional workloads and AI workloads and be able to switch between the two. So actually our data centers can support both workloads moving forward. We're also supporting the high density racks. And that's important. And then therefore you need to cool them appropriately. So we're trying to use the best in class liquid cooling and other kind of cooling methods to make sure that we're efficient on our PUEs, etc. On the connectivity side, we're building more connectivity. We're trying to invest in different routes because there are pinch points geographically down the Suez, but also in Bab al-Mandab towards Yemen, which is stopping our hyperscalers, stopping them from connecting to their availability zones in other countries. And they need to do that because they need to replicate information. They need to be efficient. Now, what are some of the operational challenges to answer your second point? The first is land. And the second is power. And ideally, you want land next to power. So this is a challenge that all the data centers players are facing. Rajit started to mention the power, but you need to have land, maybe campuses that are next to power. I think the third thing is talent. This is an evolving industry. We need to have the right talent pool and evolve that and train that so that they can keep up. People are worried about losing their jobs. AI could create jobs. So, there's a flip side to all of this. And obviously, there are legislations that we have to go through in terms of from a municipality point of view, getting permits, etc. The government has a excellent part to play in easing that, making it an easier place for us to do business. And they are doing a number of things that are making our lives easier. So we
Can you
appreciate
tell us a
that.
bit about that? The ease of doing business initiatives. Could you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I think one of my colleagues mentioned Vision 2030, which has been extremely important, not only for AI and the digital space, but for the whole of the country. And that sets the strategic direction, right? But then the cloud first policies helps us to operationalize those. So they've been extremely helpful to us. What do I mean by that? The government has encouraged public sector to digitize. That creates demand for us. That's helped us. It's helped a private sector to move workloads into the cloud, so cloudify, and that's important because it has allowed the organizations like the hyperscalers to come and go after that demand. And they're also putting in kind of marketing and global awareness of KSA as being a hub and an easy place to do business. allowing organizations to de-risk their entry to the market and host here. The other one or two things are the fact that they've encouraged HQs to move to the region, into KSA. That has certainly helped us because obviously, if the headquarters are here, then they will grow within the country. And they've actually incentivized cloud players to put instances in the country in terms of power and other things, which makes it a more attractive place to do business within KSA.
The investment process has also been streamlined with now 100% foreign ownership and these special economic zones benefit that are available for the tech companies. So that's quite an important step and does once again help towards enabling the industry's progress. And I think it's also important to note that there are also some incentives from a financial perspective, which is coming in through corporate tax breaks, 5% for the first 20 years in these special economic zones, flexibility around the workforce localization, and the fast tracking of licensing, making all of these things, the kingdom as a preferred destination. And obviously, everything underpinning all of them is the strong political will to make the kingdom a global AI and data center hub.
Okay, Obinna, now I'd like to pick your brain. You have also seen internationally governments working very hard to make sure that they, make a fertile ground for cultivating the right business environment for the growth of the cloud data center industry. Internationally, whatever you have observed, based on that, do you think the same thing is also happening in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. And both Rajit and Mabs have provided great background for this question. I would just add a few things that, in our experience, what we've seen is that when governments put in place an enabling regulatory environment, that's crucial in terms of being able to attract international capital into a market. You're seeing that obviously in the Saudi market. You're seeing all of the major US hyperscalers have expanded into that market. But that work has been done prior in terms of having this vision, the 2030 vision, making it easy to do business in that market. And what I would say is in terms of corollaries, we've seen, for example, in India, the Indian government has been very proactive about working with both local and global data center operators. They've put in place regulation to attract foreign investment, international hyperscalers into their market. We've seen the same in Brazil. We've seen the same in Mexico. So in each one of these markets, the government has gone out to put in place an enabling regulatory environment that will attract foreign investment and that will enable foreign investments to have significant ownership in that local market and bring their technology, bring their know-how to support enterprises and to support the government. And the other thing that we have seen in these markets that I've mentioned is that the government also provides long-term contracts to both local and global data center operators. And so we've seen that in India, where the Indian government has provided long-term contracts to data center operators there. We've seen the same in Mexico. We've seen the same in Brazil. And, the global trend that we see, Deborah, is that a lot of workloads, enterprise workloads that are offshore are repatriating back onshore into these markets, right? And so when you have that sort of a trend, there's a need to identify and work with both international and local operators to host that data onshore. So that is the global trend, and we're definitely going to see that in Saudi. And so I think what we're seeing in Saudi is going to be a bit of a blueprint and a model that other markets may look to replicate.
That was a very interesting observation, Obinna. All right, gentlemen, let's now move on to our third segment, which is investments into sustainable power sources. I know all of you are passionate about this. Sustainability is the biggest buzzword today. I'd like to start with Mabs. Mabs, how are you integrating your ESG goals into day-to-day operations? That whole mindset it requires a major shift if you want to create that culture, right? So what are you doing on the organizational level to create that culture to appreciate sustainability?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. Yeah, it's very important from a sustainability point of view that we don't just focus on power, on renewable power. We have to start looking at the whole ecosystem in the way that we work on all of our operations. And it's a cultural thing. Important to note that the customer is very important. They have commitments to their shareholders. And we're trying to help our customers to achieve those goals. Okay. So what we've tried to do is ingrain sustainability all the way from design to build. So we're using the right technologies in terms of cooling, in terms of operations, in terms of metering, etc., to make sure we use the most efficiency of power. We then move on to looking at renewables, whether that's green energy, solar, and we're investigating all of those. And we will rely on our colleagues like Rajit with his immense kind of background with aqua power and to kind of bring more and more of that technology into the kingdom, and we'll be looking to use them, of course, like that. Because the final thing to say around ESG and anything to do in our ecosystem is partnership is crucial. So we can't do everything ourselves. So we look to bring the expertise of our partners in when and where we can. Thank you.
Rajit, why don't you take us through your ESG goals and how do you incorporate it into your day-to-day operations? Are you betting big on solar energy? What are your thoughts on wind energy? Tell us about your vision for sustainability.
Okay, so thank you for that, Deborah. From a ESG sustainability perspective, sustainability is at the heart of the future of data centers as we define it. I mean, we decided to come into the data center industry because we said we're gonna find a few points of disruption around which we will transition this industry from version 1.0 to version 2.0. And one of the most important pivots around which we said we're gonna disrupt this industry is around sustainability. And sustainability, not because of the requirement of decarbonization, but simply because in the way we design our plants and the way we actually source the supply chain and execute these plans, the whole sustainability angle leads to a much more cost-effective and really very competitive solution. It's not just for the sake of decarbonizing, but it is actually the solution which leads to the most optimized solution out there. Energy is obviously very important and central to all of this. And what we are doing is we are going to be building all of these data centers, some of them gigafactories, as we call it, with 24/7 green energy, which is typically a combination of different sources of renewable energies complemented together with battery storage. And very specifically in the case of the NEOM AI factory that we are building, it will be in combination with green hydrogen, because as you know, the group is also building a $9 billion world's largest utility scale green hydrogen out there, 600 tons per day. And so we become on-site one of the important customers of the green hydrogen that is coming out. By the way, that green hydrogen plant is almost 80% ready. And the first tests and commissioning is ongoing. And during the course of 2027, we will see the 600 tons per day of green hydrogen coming out. I think. But so this NEOM plant in itself is a net zero plant, and is done around all the different technologies of renewable energy on a lowest cost basis. But beyond the whole energy generation, I think it is also important to understand that we are doing this NEOM data center, or the NEOM Oxagon data center, also by using cooling technologies that are the first of its kind in the world. So, for example, apart from using liquid cooling in a major way, what is very important to understand is that we are using water cooling. And no one has built data centers of scale, not even at 50 megawatt IT load capacity, using water cooling. So we are actually doing water cooling along with the liquid cooling in order to get to efficiencies, which is measured in PUEs of close to 1. This is like doing a data center in the middle of the desert, equivalent to the efficiency that you will get if it was being done in north of Finland or north of Sweden in this world. That's what it is. Who in the world, in terms of imagining, would think that you would be able to build data centers of scale with the same level of efficiency as if it is in the north of the European continent and so on and so forth. So with all these technical savviness, creativity, ingenuity, we are able to not only design these data centers that are working on the back of renewable energy, but we are bringing in the innovation around the cooling systems and pushing the boundary limits of how data centers from an efficiency perspective have been working. Last but not the least, Deborah, I would like to say that it is very important for people to understand the world has still not yet figured out, but they need to understand that when you move from cloud infrastructure to AI workload, the load balancing is a big game changer in terms of the spikes. Okay, it's not like the ChatGPT types of workload or the inferencing workload is the same throughout the year. Again, let me give you an example so that you understand. When you go and book your Uber taxi, you know there is a time of the day at which the pricing of that Uber is 2x or 3x of the price at which you can get at some other time, which is not the peak load. Similarly, AI workloads for inferencing go through bursts of spikes, and the current grid is not able to manage those spikes. What we do in terms of our integrated solution and bringing in these green hydrogen and battery solutions as part of the power solution is we manage the harmonics, the difference in the frequency between our system and the grid, and make sure that we do not cause strain on the grid while continuing with the reliability of uninterrupted services to cater for this workload, this AI workload. So technically speaking, all of this is very important to understand that as the whole pathway, as the whole requirement for AI workloads are going to go through these seismic changes and these seismic, let's say these requirements from a technical stability point of view, we are able to proactively and looking ahead, able to cater to all of these challenges that the world will see. And therefore, I think that NEOM Oxagon data center is going to be one of its kind across the multiple dimensions that you may want to evaluate it under. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'd like to bring Obinna in now. Could you tell us from an international perspective, different governments across different geographies are looking at sustainability very seriously these days. Compared to that, do you see the same passion in the Middle East based on what you've observed and studied across the world?
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. Look, I think that's a great question. And Rajit, has really done, and Babs have done a great job in terms of laying out from the operator perspective, how ESG is a big part of their focus. Look, globally, ESG is definitely a core issue for governments and investors. The challenge is that as these data center projects are scaling and growing, particularly on the AI side, as I mentioned, we're seeing projects from at a minimum of 100 megawatts scaling up to 1,000 megawatts. It's putting pressure on the energy supply chain. It's putting pressure on the water supply chain, and so that there are questions around how can we continue to develop and invest in this infrastructure without impacting energy for consumers and for businesses, as well as dealing with supply chain issues. I should say, for example, that the trend from a power perspective is we're seeing more higher density infrastructure for AI workloads. So, for example, NVIDIA has announced that they will be coming out with a 600 kilowatt rack later on this year. Next year, they'll be coming out with a 1 megawatt rack. And so it calls into question the cooling infrastructure that will be needed. I should say that about 40% of the energy that's used in a data center is for cooling purposes, cooling the equipment in the facility. And so, what we are seeing is that a number of governments have basically taken proactive steps in terms of providing renewable energy for investors to come into their countries, to supply to data centers. We at the IFC, we are a major sustainability coordinator. And so all of our data centers that we are investing in are all considered to be green data centers because they meet energy efficiency requirements. They have a PUE of 1.5 or less. And so this is a very important topic for us. We're also looking to support the development of green data centers, whether it's by providing financial incentives, providing technical support, bringing consultants, whether it's on the cooling side or the renewable energy side. We're looking to make sure that at least 30 to 40% of the energy going to these data centers is coming from renewable energy sources. And so there's a number of things that we're doing, working together with governments and regulators to ensure that as the industry is growing in a sustainable manner.
Thank you so much for that, Obinna. All right, gentlemen, it's time to bring this to a close. I'd like to get some closing remarks from you. 1 minute each. Mabs, you want to go first?
Yes, certainly, Deborah. Thank you. Well, look, KSA is definitely becoming a digital powerhouse and very quickly becoming the regional data hub. And we're looking to support them on that mission. I think the AI race is hotting up. We've heard a lot about it today. I think KSA is in an ideal position to win that race due to its strategic location, the initiatives from the government, and the fact that that all of the operators in that space are really trying to make it easy for our customers to do business here. We at Center 3 are looking forward to that journey and being the nation's pride in terms of supporting that mission and vision. Thank you.
My key takeaway would be that Saudi Arabia is clearly emerging as the leading AI and cloud computing hub in the Middle East, driven primarily by Vision 2030 and the government-backed hyperscale investments. The government's regulatory and investment framework makes the kingdom one of the most attractive destinations for global hyperscalers and AI developers. Sustainability and the lowest cost of compute is at the core of Saudi's data center strategy. And that obviously leverages on the political will, the availability of land, the speed to market, and leveraging on the complement of solar, wind, and hydrogen to power the next-gen AI infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Rajit. Obinna, you want to share your concluding remarks with us, please?
Thank you, Deborah. And, again, thank you for inviting us to this session. It's really been a pleasure to speak with Rajit and Mabs and yourself. I would just say that, look, overall, we see that we are at an inflection point in several areas. This market is at an inflection point. It has transitioned from a telco-dominated market to now essentially a hyperscale, really driven market. And so that's a key inflection point. And so, going forward, we would expect significant growth in this market over the next 5 to 10 years. We're at an inflection point in terms of technology. We're in the sort of first year or two of AI technology, and there's much more to come. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how this, plays out from a technology standpoint. And the fact that, the Saudi market is positioning itself as a regional hub. I think this is really going to be a third sort of inflection point because over the next 5 to 10 years, this market will probably look very different. And so this is a very interesting sort of dynamic in this market. There are multiple inflection points, and it's something that I think we at IFC where we'll continue to monitor and look for ways that we can be supportive to companies in the region, in this market, as well as the hyperscalers that are looking to expand and grow there as well. Thank you.
So exciting times ahead for Saudi Arabia and the Middle East overall. Thank you so much for joining us today, gentlemen. Rajit, Nanda, CEO, DataVolt; Mabs Khan, Chief Strategy Officer, Center 3; and Obinna, Isiadinso, Global Sector Lead, Data Centers and Cloud Services, International Finance Corporation. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. We hope you enjoyed participating in this podcast. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to
very much.
Obinna, Mabs, and yourself, Deborah, for a lovely comparing of the talk show. Thank you.
And that's a wrap. This episode of W.Media Deep Dive is brought to you by the Dubai Cloud and Data Center Convention that will take place at the JW Marriott Marquez Hotel on September 11 this year. We will also be hosting our maiden edition of Dubai Interconnect World here. For more information and to share your feedback, please write to us at india@w.media. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Deborah. We'll see you in the next episode of W.Media Deep Dive. Bye for now.